You're attending that wedding whether you like it or not, Emma. Miss it, and I'm cutting you off completely. You understand me? My father's voice came through the phone, cold and absolute. I sat in my apartment in Denver, Colorado, staring at the acceptance letter on my desk, the one nobody in my family knew existed. It was for a graduate program in civil engineering, something I'd earned entirely through my own merit. My name is Emma Richardson, and I'm 22 years old. For most of my life, I've been the invisible daughter in a family that only had eyes for one person, my younger sister, Rachel. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose every achievement was celebrated like breaking news. Me? I was just the backup plan, the disappointment, the one who existed to make Rachel look better by comparison. The wedding my father was threatening me about was Rachel's big day. She was marrying Brandon, some guy from a wealthy family who worked in investment banking. I'd met him exactly twice, and both times he'd looked through me like I was wallpaper. They were perfect for each other in that way, both so self-absorbed they could barely see past their own reflections. "Dad, I have finals that week," I said, even though it was a lie. I'd already graduated 3 weeks earlier, magna cum laude, with a degree in civil engineering. I'd walked across that stage with honors, been named valedictorian of my class, and accepted a job offer starting at $115,000 a year. None of them knew because I hadn't told them. I'd stopped sharing my accomplishments with my family years ago when I realized they didn't care. "Finals can wait," he snapped. "Your sister's wedding happens once. You think your mother and I worked ourselves to the bone putting you through school so you could skip family obligations?" That line made me want to laugh, though I kept it silent. Worked themselves to the bone? They'd paid my first semester of tuition 4 years ago and held it over my head ever since like they'd bought me a mansion. After that first semester, I'd taken out loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and applied for every scholarship I could find. I'd paid my own way through college while they threw money at Rachel's sorority fees, spring break trips to Cabo, and designer wardrobe. "I'll think about it," I said. "You'll do more than think about it. You'll be there in a dress with a smile on your face, or you can forget about me writing another tuition check. Your choice." He hung up before I could respond. I set my phone down and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much. A studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom that sometimes smelled like the neighbors cooking. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every book had been paid for with money I'd earned myself. My family had no idea I'd been financially independent for years. The threat about tuition was laughable. There was no tuition left to pay. I'd finished my degree, graduated at the top of my class, and landed a position at Riverside Engineering Group, one of the top civil engineering firms in the Mountain West. I was set to start in 2 weeks, right after Rachel's wedding, which I had zero intention of attending, but my father didn't know that. Neither did my mother. And Rachel? She probably didn't even know I existed half the time. The envelope sat on my desk, thick and official. Inside was a cashier's check for the exact amount my parents had paid toward my first semester of college 4 years ago. I'd calculated it down to the penny, $13,200. It had taken me months to save it, setting aside portions of my paychecks and living on ramen and discounted groceries. But I'd done it. I wasn't giving it to them out of obligation or gratitude. I was giving it to them to cut the last thread that tied me to their control. Once they had this money back, they'd have no leverage over me. No threats, no guilt trips, nothing. The wedding was in 2 days. I'd already decided I wasn't going, but I hadn't told them yet. I wanted to see the look on my father's face when I handed him that envelope. I wanted him to realize that his threats meant nothing, that I didn't need him or his money, and that I'd succeeded in spite of them, not because of them. Maybe it was petty. Maybe I should have just cut ties quietly and moved on. But after years of being treated like I didn't matter, I wanted them to know exactly what they'd lost. Growing up in my family felt like living in a spotlight that was always pointed at someone else. Rachel was 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she was born, everything revolved around her. She was the pretty one, the charming one. The one who could wrap my parents around her little finger with a single smile. On the other hand, was practical, quiet, focused on school, because that was the only place I felt like I mattered. My parents never said I wasn't good enough, but they didn't have to. Their actions made it clear. When I made honor roll in middle school, my mother glanced at the certificate and said, "That's wonderful, sweetie," before turning back to help Rachel rehearse for her dance recital. When I won a regional science fair in high school, my father patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good job," then spent the rest of dinner talking about Rachel's cheerleading squad making it to state championships. I learned early on that my achievements were footnotes in the story of Rachel's life. By the time I got to college, I'd stopped trying to compete for their attention. I focused on my studies, worked my jobs, and built a life separate from theirs. I came home for holidays because it was expected, but I stopped sharing details about my classes, my internships, or my plans for the future. What was the point? They weren't listening anyway. Rachel, meanwhile, coasted through a marketing degree at a state school funded entirely by our parents. She joined a sorority, went to parties, and posted endless photos of herself on social media, looking glamorous and carefree. She graduated with mediocre grades and no job prospects, but that didn't matter. She'd met Brandon during her senior year, and he had money and connections, which was all my parents cared about. The engagement had been announced 6 months ago at a family dinner I'd reluctantly attended. Rachel had stood up, flashed a massive diamond ring, and squealed about how Brandon had proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. My mother had cried tears of joy. My father had shaken Brandon's hand and welcomed him to the family. I'd sat there smiling politely while they toasted to Rachel's happiness and bright future. Nobody asked me about my future. Nobody asked if I was seeing anyone or what my plans were after graduation. I was just part of the audience applauding someone else's life. After that dinner, I'd driven back to Denver and made a decision. I was done trying to be part of this family. I'd finish my degree, get my job, and move on. They could have their perfect daughter and their perfect son-in-law and their perfect life. I didn't need to be included. The wedding was at a venue in Aurora, about 20 minutes from my apartment. I arrived at 1:15, 15 minutes late, because I'd sat in my car for an extra 10 minutes trying to work up the nerve to go inside. The venue was beautiful, of course. Rachel had spared no expense. The garden was filled with white roses and twinkling lights, and a string quartet played softly near the entrance. Guests milled around in expensive clothes, sipping champagne and admiring the decorations. I walked inside and immediately spotted my parents near the front, talking to Brandon's family. My father was laughing at something Brandon's dad had said, his hand resting on my mother's back. They looked happy, proud, completely absorbed in the moment. I took a deep breath, gripped the envelope in my hand, and walked toward them. My father saw me first. His expression shifted instantly from relaxed to annoyed. "You're late," he said, loud enough that a few people turned to look. "Traffic," I lied. My mother glanced at my dress and frowned. "Oh, Emma, that's what you're wearing?" I looked down at my navy dress. It was modest, elegant, and appropriate. But I knew what she meant. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream wealth or status. It was just a dress. "It's fine," I said. "Well, I suppose it'll have to do. Come on, we need to take family photos before the ceremony." She gestured toward a group gathering near a floral arch. I didn't move. Instead, I held out the envelope to my father. "What's this?" he asked, taking it but not opening it. "Open it." He gave me a suspicious look, then tore open the envelope. His eyes widened as he pulled out the check. "What is this?" he repeated, but his tone had changed. He wasn't annoyed anymore. He was confused. "It's a check for $13,200, I said. "That's the exact amount you paid for my first semester of college." "I'm paying you back." My mother leaned in to look at the check, her mouth falling open. "Emma, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've been holding that tuition payment over my head for 4 years. You've threatened to stop paying for my education every time I didn't do what you wanted." "Well, I'm done. That's your money back. Now you don't have any leverage." My father stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Leverage? Emma, we're your parents. We were trying to help you. Help me? I let out a short, bitter laugh. You paid for one semester and then acted like you'd funded my entire degree. I paid for the rest myself. Loans, scholarships, 3 jobs. I did it all on my own while you threw money at Rachel like it was confetti. That's not fair, my mother said, her voice rising. We've always supported you. No, you haven't. You supported Rachel. I was just an afterthought. People were starting to stare now. I could see guests pausing their conversations, turning their heads toward us. My father's face flushed red, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. This is not the time or place for this conversation. Your sister is about to get married. I know, and I'm not staying. What? I'm not staying for the wedding. I came here to give you that check and to tell you that I'm done. Done pretending I'm part of this family. Done being invisible. Done letting you treat me like I don't matter. My mother reached out like she was going to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Emma, you're being ridiculous. You can't just leave. Watch me. I turned and started walking toward the exit. My father called after me, his voice sharp and commanding. Emma, get back here right now. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, but my steps steady. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice, high-pitched and frantic, saying something about how embarrassing this was, how I was ruining everything. But I wasn't ruining anything. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. The week after I left Rachel's wedding, my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 19 times in 3 days. My father sent increasingly angry texts demanding I explain myself. Rachel left voicemails that started out confused and quickly turned accusatory. I ignored all of them. Instead, I focused on preparing for my new job. I spent my days researching Riverside Engineering Group, reviewing the projects I'd be working on, and organizing my apartment. I bought professional clothes, set up a home office space, and tried to convince myself that cutting off my family had been the right decision. Most of the time, I believed it. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, doubts crept in. Had I overreacted? Should I have just attended the wedding? Was I being petty and vindictive? Then I'd remember the way my father had looked at me when I handed him that check. Not with understanding or pride, but with confusion and irritation, like I'd interrupted something important. I'd remember my mother's immediate concern about my dress, not about me. And I'd remember the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like a supporting character in someone else's story. No, I hadn't overreacted. I'd finally stood up for myself. On Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the wedding, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Rachel standing in the hallway, dressed in designer jeans and a silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled. I considered, not opening the door, but curiosity got the better of me. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping the door partially closed. Can I come in? How did you even get my address? Mom had it from when you moved in. Can I please come in? We need to talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Rachel walked into my apartment and looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly. I knew what she was thinking. My place was small, simple. Nothing like the luxury condo she and Brandon had just moved into. What do you want, Rachel? She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. I want to know why you ruined my wedding. I didn't ruin your wedding. I left before it even started. Exactly. You left, and it caused this huge scene. Mom spent the entire ceremony crying. Dad was furious. Everyone was asking where you were and what happened. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I crossed my arms. I'm sorry my absence was inconvenient for you. That's not what I meant. She wiped at her eyes, smudging her mascara. I just don't understand. Why would you do that? Why would you give Dad that money and just walk out? Because I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. What are you talking about? You matter. You're my sister. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really? When's the last time you asked me how I was doing? When's the last time Mom or Dad came to one of my events or celebrated one of my accomplishments? Rachel looked genuinely confused. What accomplishments? And there it was, the proof that I'd been invisible all along. I graduated 3 weeks ago, I said quietly. Magna cum laude, valedictorian. I gave a speech at the ceremony. None of you came because none of you knew about it. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't care. Her mouth fell open. You graduated? Why didn't you say anything? Because every time I tried to talk about my life, you or Mom or Dad changed the subject to talk about you, your sorority, your boyfriend, your wedding, your plans. There was never room for me in the conversation. Rachel sank onto my couch, looking genuinely shaken. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You never asked. We talked for another hour. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. When she left, she promised to try harder, to actually be interested in my life. I wasn't sure if she'd follow through, but it was a start. My first week at Riverside Engineering Group was overwhelming in the best way possible. The office was modern and bright, with an open floor plan and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. My team consisted of 6 other engineers, all brilliant and passionate about infrastructure development. My supervisor, Margaret, was a woman in her 50s who'd been in the industry for decades and had a reputation for being both demanding and supportive. I threw myself into the work, grateful for the distraction. On Friday afternoon, Margaret called me into her office. "How's your first week been?" she asked. "Good, really good. I'm learning a lot. You're doing excellent work. I've been impressed with your contributions this week." She paused. "I also wanted to mention something. We're putting together a proposal for a major project with the city of Denver. It's a comprehensive infrastructure initiative, water systems, transportation, green infrastructure. If we win the contract, it'll be one of the biggest projects the company has ever taken on." That sounds incredible. It is. And I want you on the team. You'd be working closely with me and 2 senior engineers. It's a lot of responsibility, especially for someone just starting out, but I think you can handle it. I felt a surge of excitement. I'd love to be part of it. Good. We're presenting the proposal to the City Council in 3 weeks. I'll need you to help with the technical documentation and be prepared to answer questions during the presentation. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd worked so hard for. And I'd earned it on my own merit, not because of family connections or favoritism. 3 weeks after my conversation with Rachel, my phone rang late one evening. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever conversation she wanted to have, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? Emma, honey? It's Mom." Her voice was strained, like she'd been crying. "I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it?" "It's your father. He's had a heart attack." My stomach dropped. "What? When?" "This afternoon. He collapsed at the office. They rushed him to the hospital, and he's stable now, but the doctors say he needs to make some major lifestyle changes. Less stress, better diet, more rest." I sank onto my couch, processing this information. Despite everything, he was still my father. The thought of him having a heart attack scared me more than I wanted to admit. Is he going to be okay? They think so. But Emma, we need to talk about his business. With him in the hospital, someone needs to step in and help manage things, at least temporarily. And with everything that's been happening, I thought maybe you could... No. Emma, please. I know, things have been difficult between us, but your father needs help. The business is struggling, and if someone doesn't step in, we could lose everything. Then hire someone. Or ask Rachel. Rachel doesn't know anything about business management, and we can't afford to hire someone. You're the only one who has the skills and knowledge to help us through this. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. This was exactly what they'd always done. Waited until there was a crisis, then expected me to fix it. Mom, I'm sorry Dad is sick. I really am. But I can't drop everything to save his business. I have my own career, my own responsibilities. Your career can wait. This is family. Family works both ways. You can't ignore me for years and then expect me to come running when you need something. She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had turned cold. So that's it. You're just going to abandon us when we need you most. I'm not abandoning you. I'm setting boundaries. If you need help with Dad's business, hire a consultant. If you need emotional support, call Rachel. But don't ask me to give up everything I've worked for to bail you out. Fine. I can see we can't count on you. I'll figure something else out. She hung up before I could respond. The presentation to the Denver City Council was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Our team had put together a comprehensive proposal that included detailed technical specifications, cost analyses, environmental impact projections, and implementation timelines. When it was my turn to present, I stood and approached the screen where our slides were displayed. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. Good afternoon. I'm Emma Richardson, and I'll be discussing the environmental impact assessment and long-term sustainability metrics for this project. I walked them through the data, explaining the methodology, addressing potential concerns, and highlighting the environmental benefits. As I spoke, I could see some of the council members nodding, taking notes, leaning forward with interest. The questions came fast and intense, but our team fielded each one smoothly. When the session ended, Margaret had a huge smile on her face. That was excellent. You handled those questions like a pro. A week later, we received the news. We'd won the contract. The celebration at the office was electric. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, and I'd earned my place on the team. The following months brought unexpected changes. My parents faced the full consequences of their choices: bankruptcy, downsizing, starting over with almost nothing. My father took a part-time consulting job, and my mother went back to work. Rachel helped where she could, but she and Brandon had their own lives to build. As for me, I continued moving forward. I started the graduate program, excelled in my new role, and slowly built a relationship with Rachel based on honesty rather than obligation. My father and I eventually met for coffee. He'd lost weight and his face was drawn. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You're welcome. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the heart attack, about my life, my choices, my priorities, and I realized I've made a lot of mistakes, especially with you. Your mother and I put too much pressure on Rachel and not enough attention on you. We took you for granted, assumed you'd be fine because you were independent. But that wasn't fair to you. You deserved better. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't address all the specific ways they'd hurt me, but it was honest, and it was a start. I appreciate you saying that. I also want you to know that I read the articles about your project. I had no idea you were doing such important work. I'm impressed, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to support you along the way. I didn't tell you about it because I didn't think you'd care. I know, and that's on me." He took a sip of his coffee. "I don't expect you to forgive me or to suddenly want a close relationship, but I hope we can start fresh. Maybe slowly build something better." We talked for another hour. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension, but it felt real in a way our conversations never had before. Looking back on that day at Rachel's wedding, the day I handed my father that envelope and walked away, I realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my worth, refusing to be controlled, and choosing myself for the first time in my life. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been mine. And that made all the difference. I'd built a career I was proud of, earned respect from colleagues who valued my contributions, and learned to validate myself instead of seeking approval from people who would never give it freely. My relationship with Rachel improved slowly. We met for coffee regularly, and she made genuine efforts to know me as a person, not just as her sister. My parents and I maintained a careful distance, meeting occasionally but with clear boundaries in place. I accepted the graduate program position and balanced it with my work at Riverside Engineering Group. My future was bright, filled with opportunities I'd created for myself through hard work and determination, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from expectations, free from the need for approval, free to be exactly who I was meant to be. The envelope I'd handed my father that day at the wedding wasn't just a check. It was a declaration of independence, a statement that I was worth more than they'd ever recognized, and a promise to myself that I would never again accept less than I deserved. I'd spent 22 years being invisible in my own family. But I'd spent the last few months discovering that I didn't need them to see me. I just needed to see myself. And now, finally, I did.